The War for Mansoul by John Bunyan is told by Ethel Barrett, copyright 1998, Christian Light Publications Incorporated, Harrisonburg, Virginia. Triumphal return from the field. Mr. Prywell stood on a platform along the main street of Mansell and looked out over the crowds. The platform had been hastily erected, but the rough work was covered with boughs and sweet-smelling moss, and the railing was entwined with flowers and vines of every description. There were other platforms like it all along the way, and above them the balconies on the house had been made into veritable gardens with vines streaming down and almost reaching the crowds in the streets. The din of shouting was deafening as the Mansoulians jostled and jockeyed for vantage positions and ran to and fro with flowers and garlands and chains and bouquets. Everyone, it seemed, had flowers of one sort or another, and the air was redolent with a sweet perfume. Outside on the plain the dust of battle had settled. The captains and elders and gentry of Mansell had saluted Emmanuel in the field and welcomed him with 1,000 welcomes. And he had smiled upon them and said, "Peace be to you." Then they had put their camps in order, and now they were all returning in a triumphal march. The sun was shining now. It was like a glorious morning after a fearful night. It would be impossible to describe their joy, Prywell thought. Then, through the din, he heard the music. They must be drawing near the gates. He could hear the choirs singing. Wait. Listen. He tried to catch what they were singing. Oh, yes. Lift up your gates, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. He strained his ears to catch it. Ah, just a moment. Ah, yes, another choir now. Who is this King of glory? He caught it now. The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. They came out in full voice, and the choir answered choir as the song progressed and repeated itself. How they sing, thought Prywell, as though they burst their throats. All the music could be heard above the din as, one by one, the Mansoulians stopped shouting to listen. Now there were trumpets and songs all along the thoroughfare, coming closer. They have seen thy goings, O God, even the goings of my God, my King, in the sanctuary. Before the crowd could hardly take this in, the first of the procession was in sight. Singers, players on instruments, timbrels. Blessed be the Prince that cometh in the name of his Father Shaddai. Someone shouted it, and the crowd took it up. Blessed be he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Yea, Captain Faith, was a new shout up the way. Prywell strained his eyes to see. Yes, the captains were coming now. Faith! Prywell found himself shouting along with the rest as the captain went by. Then the others. Captain Goodhope, Captain Love, Captain Guileless, Captain Patience, each with his officers and soldiers, banners streaming. Yea, Captain Experience! Yes, the Mansoulian captains and officers were there too. Mr. Knowledge was there, Mr. Mind, all of them. Prywell saluted them as they went by. They were battered and bandaged, but their faces were shining. And then, the Prince! The cry split the air. The banners waved, and flowers were thrown upon the street by the crowds in the balconies. Garlands of flowers, and chains of flowers, and bouquets of flowers, and single flowers of every kind, until the street was a blanket of flowers, and the perfume lifted up to the sky. The Prince was coming. The Prince was coming. And then, in the crowds, everything stopped. The people in the balconies and the people on the street stopped, and the waving stopped, and the shouting stopped, and the streamers in the air floated to the ground and stopped, and the children who were running stopped. And all that could be heard was the muted clatter of horses' hooves on the flowers, and the muted rumbling of the wheels of Emmanuel's chariot on the flowers. And the cry from the hearts of the people, unspoken and unheard, hung in the air like a silent anthem. The pillars of the prince's chariot were of silver. The bottom of it was gold, and the covering of it was of purple. And the prince's armor was of beaten gold. And when they saw him, the townsfolk wept silently, astonished at his love for them. And so he rode by. Prywell watched through his tears until the chariot was out of sight, on its way to the castle, where Lord Moyer Understanding and Lord Will and Mr. Conscience and all the gentry of the palace were waiting. There would be no shouts, no speeches. They would bow before him and kiss the dust at his feet, and they would bless him and praise him and thank him for pitying them in their misery and returning to them with mercies. And then he would go into the castle, which had been cleaned and prepared for him by the presence of the Lord High Secretary and the work of Captain Faith. Prywell climbed down from the platform and mingled with the crowds in the street. They were closing in behind the rear guard of Emmanuel's chariot. As he trod through the flowers, he remembered the nights he had prowled the streets, huddled against the chill wind and kicking the rubbish aside, until he had found Mr. Mischief.